This past week, Toyota officially revealed the sibling to the BRZ, and it looks pretty much exactly as you'd expect it to. Like the BRZ, but slightly pointier and red. Shall we discuss? So, as always, if you are new here, my name is Zach, and this is a car channel, and we talk about car stuff, because that's typically how that works. So, as you probably know by now, the 2022 Subaru BRZ was revealed a few months ago, sporting some new styling, slightly refreshed interior with a more modern digital gauge cluster, apparently 50% stiffer chassis and stiffer suspension, and finally a new engine, the FA24D, which, as the name implies, is a 2.4-liter boxer engine, and it gets a 28 horsepower increase from the 200 horsepower FA20 in the last generation, and it gets a 31 pound of torque increase, so it's now making 181 foot-pounds of torque. This engine also addresses the infamous torque dip, which happened generally between 3,500 and 4,500 RPM, which would cause the car's power band to just... However, it did not address the debated lack of a turbocharger, and the reaction to that was also as you'd expect. We'll talk more about that later. As you probably know from the last generation, the Toyota 86 is the same as the BRZ, but kind of different, but literally the same as the BRZ. The song remains the same with this new generation, except this time around it's now called the GR86, and it's now being sold underneath the GR brand, along with the Supra and the GR Yaris that Toyota refused to sell to us. So it now has an R in the name, and R means racing, as you know, and Gazoo means little green Martian from the Flintstones, I think. Actually, according to Toyota, Gazoo is another name for garage. Nah, can't hang out right now. Gotta go work on the 86 and the Gazoo. Can't really say that's a word that's in my vocabulary. So, other than the new name, Toyota did make some changes right before the reveal, apparently. They said that they apparently may need to delay the car because, quote-unquote, it felt too much like a Subaru. They said, nope, it's all wrong. Akio said, send it back. So basically, Toyota wanted a cheeseburger, but with less cheese on it, but not a hamburger, a cheeseburger with no cheese. I make this comparison because in October of 2014, at the Allentown rest stop right next to Dorney Park, I did actually hear this argument between a McDonald's employee and a customer. It was simultaneously one of the worst and best things I've ever seen in my life. But yeah, I cannot imagine how that happened. So, what did Toyota do to truly make this a unique Toyota experience? They added, let's get you ready for this, 4 horsepower. So, now it has 232 horsepower, as opposed to the BRZ's peasant 228 horsepower. Now, a power increase is good. It's something that we've been asking for pretty much the entire existence of this chassis. But 232 horsepower is a healthy amount for a 2,800-pound car of this nature.
Well, why you pulling me? I'm right.
Fight me. But yeah, I'm not entirely sure what's going on with this delay thing. I'm sure they're probably tweaking the suspension a little bit more too. Maybe messing around with the throttle response. But apparently, according to some publications this time around, it's a little more competitive between the two. Like, they're actually trying to one-up each other. So there was some shade thrown within that horsepower bump. Maybe this will start a horsepower war, and like 10 years we'll have an engine that runs at like 9,000 or something. So other than the un-Subaruification, the GR86 gets a slightly different front end in similar fashion to the old one. It gets a gloss black honeycomb grille with the GR badge in the corner. It has some thinner and pointier vents in the corners of the bumper. Looks like it has a slightly different side skirt. Rear end is identical, interior is also identical, except the start-stop button now has a GR logo on it. They're really going all in on this branding. Now, I personally think the 86 looks better than the BRZ. I've kind of always thought that between the two since the car came out. I like the slightly more aggressive styling, and I also like the addition of the honeycomb grille. I don't think the BRZ looks bad or anything. I just think that compared to the 86, it looks a little soft and, kind of doofy looking. I don't think either of them look bad at all. I mean, they're not groundbreakingly gorgeous, but nice, simple, and inoffensive compared to some other things on the market right now.
Oh my God!
So the reveal was shared all over social media, as these things tend to go nowadays, and the reaction to the car was actually pretty positive for a change. I'm just kidding, everyone hated it. You know, a lot of people were really surprised that there was even a new generation to begin with. For years, there were articles like every week about the 86 chassis being axed, like since 2016 at least. And I mean, as we all know, the last generation was a colossal failure. So much of a failure that they have an entire car meet dedicated to the chassis every year. I mean, I don't know who's showing up to it though. And I seriously don't know why there's such a huge aftermarket for these cars either, since they were such a huge flop. I mean, these guys gotta be losing money since nobody owns these cars, right? Everyone kind of thought this car was going to be killed off because of the low sales numbers. And it was pretty obvious that it was selling poorly because it only had a 200 horsepower naturally aspirated motor. Totally not because it's a rear-wheel drive sports car with little to no backseat room and that 99% of people that are walking into dealerships are trying to buy an SUV. I mean, if these things had 300 horsepower and a turbo, they'd be flying off the dealership lots. Now, I'm no marketing expert or anything, so whether these cars are really financially viable is to be seen. I mean, it's been almost 10 years and they're still making these things, so there's something to be said about that. But yeah, these cars sit on the lot because most people that walk on the lot want a RAV4. When a person who actually wants a sports car comes onto the lot, they'll buy the sports car. Generally, that's how that works from what I understand. Cars like that are not meant to appeal to everyone. They're meant to appeal to us. Certain things are meant to appeal to certain audiences. Like that one time I was in 7th grade math class and my teacher was taking requests on Pandora, so I requested Frozen Brains Telltale Tales by Buckethead. Now, me and my other long-haired friends thought Buckethead was pretty cool, but a class full of 12-year-olds that listen to Black Eyed Peas, yeah, not so much. Pretty sure they were now convinced that I was a psychopath. So yeah, a sports car not selling as well as an SUV does not make it a failed sports car. And they're still making them, so they're clearly doing something for the company. Anyway, back to social media. Let's see what people have to say about the 086. Could the look be even more boring? Yeah, could look like this. Hairdresser car. But this is really more of a hairstylist car. There's a slick top. There's a difference. Useless. I'm not going to show you his profile, but he does have a Nissan Pathfinder as his cover photos, so just a glorified Civic. People really like to compare things to Civics as like an insult, but I don't know, man. It seemed like a pretty good benchmark to me. Unpopular opinion. These cars suck. Well, actually, it seems like a very popular opinion. Connect 4. I beat a GR86 in a clapped out 92 GMC truck. Looks nice, though. Did the other guy know you were racing? And this car's not even out yet. What are you, rolling on test mules? Now this guy says only 232 horsepower. That's for the birds. You know, the birds get it. They're small and light. Got hollow bones. So they can fly fast, make quick maneuvers. I think birds would really appreciate this car, actually. So, shockingly, the internet is less than pleased. Guess some people really aren't about that red stitching on the parking brake boot. Although I think it might have something to do with the fact that it only has 232 horsepower and no turbo, though. But for God's sake, people, just because a car has 232 horsepower max does not mean it's a bad sports car. At least that's my standpoint. Yeah, sure, it would be cool with a turbo. Most cars without turbos would be cooler with turbos. I think my Miata would be very cool with a turbo. But I don't hate it because it doesn't have one. I don't get in the thing and be like, I mean, actually, I can't get in it right now because someone backed into it and my fender is now smashed into my door. But anyway, no, that car still puts a smile on my face and it does what it's supposed to do. Because that's how it was designed and I got the experience for a pretty good price. And that's what the 86 is supposed to be, a lightweight, affordable sports car. I can assure you that most people buying these things are not concerned with the 0 to 60 time. When I bought my Miata, I really didn't care about how fast it was. I cared about how well it handled and how it felt to drive. I've never done a 0 to 60 test on that car because I really don't care. But, actually, no, I'm kind of curious. We did one with my Honda Civic once.
Stop. 18.2.
18 what?
18.2.
This is an age-old argument that was probably going down between factory employees on the assembly line of the first car. And at the end of the day, you really can't convince people who have already made up their mind. But you can annoy them, so that's a win in my book. But aside that fact, everyone seems really convinced that if this car were to be sold with the turbocharger, it would just decimate the market. And a lot of people say that they would buy it if it had a turbocharger. But would they, though, if it was really sold as a turbocharged car? I don't know about that. If the car was boosted from the factory, the price would also be boosted. Quite a bit. So this is already a low-volume car in terms of sales as it is. What do you think is going to happen if the price goes up? It would become an even lower volume car, probably be a lot less profitable, so Toyota and Subaru would probably start considering taking it around the back of the barn. For real this time. Jason Camisa has a pretty good video about the BRZ on Hagerty where he brings this up, so throughout this little rant that I'm about to go on, I'll be referencing a few of his points. One of the main things that Camisa was saying in the video is that if the 86 and BRZ were to be turbocharged, they would have to be completely redesigned. Because as of right now, they are not designed for a turbocharger from the factory. So in order to put a turbo on them, they would have to upgrade pretty much everything. Suspension, steering, brakes, ECU, those are expensive. And then have to completely reconfigure the engine bay in order to fit the plumbing. Let's look at the base model Supra with the 255 horsepower turbo 4-banger from BMW, mind you. But it costs $42,000 starting, although account the ZF gearbox. So there's your 42,255 horsepower turbocharged car. that apparently isn't even really that good, at least not compared to the 6-cylinder model, which has almost 400 horsepower. And most people are calling for 300 horsepower for the 86 chassis. So if they made a 300 horsepower 86 in BRZ, it would probably cost no less than $45,000. Can you imagine the reaction to a $45,000 86 in BRZ? People would lose their shit. They'd be on the toilet, scrolling through their phone, and they'd see that, and they'd get up and be like, bro, where's my shit? That's a lot of shit unaccounted for. We can't have that. Would I want to pay $45,000 for an 86 or a BRZ? And neither would you. Well, you might be thinking, well, what about a base model? There could be a non-turbo base model, but it would not be the chassis that we have now. It would not be the car that Toyota and Subaru originally designed. It would pretty much have to be set up to fit the things for a turbo kit from the factory. So let's take a look at some history. Take the Nissan 300ZX C32. Fantastic turbo sports car that was priced right out of the US and eventually existence. Take a look at the engine bay for the base model. Now the VG30D is still pretty packed in there. It's a pretty big motor, but you can see some extra space for some stuff. And you add the twin turb skis and there's the stuff. Same deals with the other cars from that era, Supra, 3000 GT, MR2, etc. The base models were all turbo cars without turbos, and it was noticeable. I'm not saying that an NA 300ZX or Supra is a bad car, not worth $60,000, but not bad. But let's be real, these cars couldn't really hold a candle to themselves. So you'd end up with a very expensive performance car that no one would be able to buy, and you'd end up with a base model that would likely be panned for being so lackluster compared to the performance model, like what's kind of going on with that 4-cylinder Supra. Despite those base models being offered for a lesser price, the car still went away completely, or they were redesigned to be more sustainable in the market, which was the case of the Z car, the RX-8, the MR2, and the Celica. And when they redesigned those cars for the 2000s, they didn't have all the turbochargers, the high-cast systems, the all-wheel drive systems, which is sad, but they did once again fulfill their purpose, being an affordable sports car, to an extent, because they no longer cost gobs of money to manufacture. Now, they clearly had their trade-offs, like the Toyota MR2 no longer had 240 horsepower, but it weighed 2,100 pounds and damn near handled like a Lotus. Trust me, do not sleep on these things. The Z car no longer had twin turbos and no longer had all-wheel steering, but was a lot more reliable and much easier to maintain, which is why they're still popular today. The RX-8 had a back seat. It's really turned into a history lesson more so than a video about the 86. Whatever, it's all relevant because my point is that this is a dying breed, at least it seems like it is, and Toyota and Subaru are not turning their backs on this market. I mean, what other NA hardtop sports coupes do we have? The Challenger? And I predict the Z car will not be getting any cheaper. And I'm not sitting here saying this is what we have, let's just settle. Subaru and Toyota did give us a good option and an obtainable one for this endangered class of cars. At least that's my opinion. I don't know, I've come to just really appreciate lightweight cars of this nature, which is what happens when you own a EF hatch and a Miata, I guess. It doesn't really take much to make me happy. I've also personally seen what these chassis can do on back roads, and it pleases me, so I only imagine that the new one will be doing it better. These cars will live on, hopefully, because the people who appreciate them will buy them, hopefully. So whoever watches this, might be 100 people, might be 1,000, I don't know, my view count is laughably inconsistent. This would help. Whoever watches this, do let me know what you think of the new GR86 and the BRZ. You like it? Think it's just okay? Does it make you want to eat your sofa? Let me know down below. Alright, well that is all for this video, and I shall see you guys next week, hopefully. Alright, peace.